Beneath the vast expanse of an azure sky, the village of Nduka lay nestled between rolling hills and ancient forests. The golden sun bathed the land, casting long shadows over the thatched roofs of round huts. Children's laughter echoed through the air as they chased each other barefoot over the dusty paths, their joy unbroken by the burdens of adulthood. But Nduka was more than just a village. It was a cradle of stories. Each tree in the dense forest carried whispers of the past, and every hill bore witness to generations who had lived, loved, and fallen under the gaze of the unseen forces that governed their world. The villagers lived in harmony, deeply connected to their elders and the wisdom passed down through generations. Elders sat in circles under the sacred Iroko tree, their voices firm yet melodic as they recounted the tales of the ancestors. The people knew that life was fragile, a thread woven into the greater tapestry of destiny, overseen by the spirits of the land and sky. Even in the peace of day, a sense of mystery lingered. There were places one dared not venture, and times when silence carried warnings. The villagers honored their traditions with fervor, offering sacrifices to the ancestors and holding festivals to celebrate the bond between the living and the unseen. Yet, amidst this harmony, one tale stood as a shadow over the village, a tale that few dared to speak of, for fear that it might awaken what slumbered. Under the light of the full moon, when the village gathered around the fire, the elders would sometimes recount the tale of the demon bride. It was a story told in hushed tones, the flickering flames casting eerie shadows on the faces of those who listened. Long ago, one elder began, his voice low and heavy with age, there was a family who betrayed the ancestors. They made a sacred pact with the spirits of the forest but broke their oath in pursuit of wealth and power. The ancestors were angered, and in their fury, they cursed the family line. It is said that a bride from their bloodline, on the night of her union, would transform into a demon, a creature of scales and fire, a terror to behold. Gasps rippled through the circle of listeners. Children clung to their mothers, and even the men, strong as they were, felt the weight of the tale pressing on their hearts. The curse, the elder continued, was a lesson, a punishment to teach humility and respect for the balance of the world. But the family's descendants, blinded by pride, ignored the warnings. And so the curse lived on, waiting to awaken when least expected. The villagers had long believed that the curse was more than a tale. It was a truth woven into their lives, a shadow that hung over the village like a storm cloud. Ceremonies were held to appease the spirits, and sacrifices were made to ensure that the ancestors were pleased. Yet the fear remained. What if the curse returned? Adana was the flower of Nduka, her beauty unmatched in the village and beyond. Her skin was as smooth as river stones, her eyes deep and filled with secrets, and her voice carried a melody that could soothe even the angriest spirit. Yet, despite her beauty, Adana carried a burden that dimmed her light. At 23, she was still unmarried, a rarity in Nduka, where girls often wed by their 18th year. Villagers whispered behind her back, their words sharp and unkind. Such beauty, yet no man will have her, one woman muttered, her tone tinged with envy. It is strange, another chimed in. Perhaps the curse of the ancestors runs through her veins. Adana heard the whispers, though she pretended not to. Each word felt like a thorn pricking her heart, a reminder that she was an outsider in her own home. Her father, once proud of her beauty, now walked with a bowed head, ashamed of the whispers that followed their family wherever they went. Adana's days were spent in silence, her nights in solitude. She often wandered alone, her bare feet brushing against the soft grass as she walked the edges of the forest. The chirping of crickets and the rustle of leaves were her only companions. She longed for the warmth of love, the acceptance of a family, and the joy of belonging. Yet, as the days turned to months, her loneliness grew into desperation, and the whispers of the villagers became an unbearable weight on her shoulders. One evening, as the moon hung low and the forest seemed to hum with life, Adana stood on the edge of the trees and whispered to the night, "Why do the ancestors curse me so? Am I not worthy of love?" Her voice trembled with sorrow, but the forest offered no reply. The villagers began to notice strange changes in Adana. Her once vibrant laughter was gone, replaced by silence. She no longer attended the ceremonies, always finding excuses to avoid the sacred gatherings. Most unsettling of all was the amulet she now wore, a dark, glimmering stone that seemed to pulse with an otherworldly light. "She never removes it," a hunter remarked, his tone wary. "Even when she bathes in the river, it remains around her neck." "And have you noticed the animals?" another whispered. "They scatter when she walks by, as though they sense something unnatural." Adana's restlessness grew with each passing day. She spent hours pacing in her hut, her eyes distant and unfocused. Under the full moon, some claimed they heard her speaking, though no one was there to hear her words. The village elders, too, grew uneasy. "The ancestors are restless," one said. "Something is stirring." One night, as Adana lay awake, her mind drifted to a memory of her late mother. She could see her mother's face, kind but stern, and hear her voice as though she were in the room. "Adana," her mother had said, "our family carries a shadow. The ancestors do not forget, and they do not forgive easily. If you tamper with fate, you will awaken what sleeps. Promise me, child, that you will heed this warning." Adana had laughed then, brushing off the words as the superstitions of an old woman. But now, with the weight of the villagers' stares and the whispers of the forest in her ears, the memory haunted her. "Mother," she murmured, clutching the amulet at her neck, "what have I done?" This script captures the drama, emotion, and cultural depth of African tales, gradually building tension while highlighting Adana's internal and external conflicts. Let me know if you'd like further refinements. Here's the full script for the given outline section and subheading. "Ludium, midday sun hung high in the sky, casting long shadows on the ochre-colored earth of the village. The air buzzed with the sounds of daily life, women pounding yam in wooden mortars, children laughing as they chased chickens, and elders seated under the great Iroko tree, sharing stories of the past." Adana moved gracefully through the market, square, her steps light yet commanding attention. Her beauty was the kind that made people pause, a radiance that seemed otherworldly. Her skin was smooth like the river's surface at dawn, and her hair fell in thick braids adorned with beads that clicked softly as she walked. As she approached the well, a hush fell over the crowd. Adana was new to the village, and though her charm had already drawn admiration, there was something about her presence that unsettled many. Among the onlookers was Chike, a man whose name carried weight in every corner of the land. His yam barns were the largest, his cattle the strongest, and his reputation as a wise and discerning man unmatched. Until today. Chike stumbled back, his breath catching in his throat as he watched in horror. Her fingers elongated, twisting into claw-like talons, and her once beautiful face contorted into something monstrous. Her hair twisted into serpentine tendrils, and from her head, horns began to sprout, curling upwards like a wild beast of legend. Her mouth opened, but it was no longer the voice of the woman he had married. What came forth was a low, guttural roar, so deafening that the walls of the hut seemed to tremble. The roar echoed through the village, carrying with it a wave of fear that spread like wildfire. Chike's heart raced. "Adana, what have you become?" His voice cracked as he took a step back, fear paralyzing his limbs. Her lips parted, and her voice, now a hiss, replied, "I have become what I was always meant to be. The power of my bloodline cannot be denied." With a scream, Chika turned, and fled from the hut, his legs shaking beneath him. His heart pounded as he ran into the dark village night, calling out for help. "Help! Someone! Help me!" His voice was hoarse, wild with terror. The villagers, roused by his frantic cries, began to gather. Torches flickered to life in their hands, casting long shadows on the earth as they rushed toward the source of the commotion. At the front of the group, the village elder, wise and aged with the weight of many moons, held his staff aloft. His gaze was steady, unflinching. "This is no ordinary night," he said, his voice calm but heavy with understanding. "The ancestors speak, and we must listen." The villagers gathered outside the hut, their torches creating flickering shapes on the walls. Fear clung to the air, thick as smoke. The elder stepped forward, raising his staff. With a deep breath, he closed his eyes, his lips moving silently as he consulted the spirits through divination. His voice broke the stillness. "The curse has awoken. It was laid upon Adana's ancestors long ago, a curse born of greed and betrayal." The villagers held their breath, their faces grim with the weight of his words. Generations ago, the elder continued, his voice growing louder. Adana's ancestors betrayed the spirits, seeking to possess what was forbidden. In their desperation, they made a pact with dark forces, and in return, the spirits cursed their bloodline, ensuring that the price of greed would be paid in darkness. This curse remained dormant, until Adana came seeking the charm that was never meant for her. The villagers looked at each other, confusion and fear painted across their faces. "Then it is her fault," muttered one man, his voice rising with anger. "She has brought this upon us all." Silence. The elder's command rang out, cutting through the murmurs. "The curse is not just Adana's doing. It is the result of her ancestors' choices, and it must be undone by a path they never foresaw." As the elder spoke, Adana, now fully transformed into the monstrous being she had become, knelt on the ground, her body writhing in sorrow. She wept. Great, soul-wrenching sobs that echoed through the village. "Please forgive me," she cried, her voice now tinged with desperation. "I never wanted this. All I sought was love, acceptance. Please, I never meant to bring harm to anyone." Her eyes, once fierce and burning with power, now shimmered with tears of regret. "I only wanted to be loved, Cheek. I only wanted to be someone who mattered." The villagers, torn between fear and sympathy, exchanged glances. Some of them, their hearts hardened by the terror they had just witnessed, called for her punishment. "We must banish her. She is cursed," one of them shouted. "She has brought this evil into our lives. It is the only way to save us." Others, however, looked upon her with sorrow, remembering the woman they had once known. "She has suffered enough," they whispered. "Perhaps there is still a way to break the curse." A deep silence fell over the village as the elder raised his staff once more. "The decision lies with the ancestors," he said solemnly. "We will call upon them one last time to guide us." The villagers waited, their hearts heavy, as the elder closed his eyes and began to chant. The fate of Adana and of the village now rested in the hands of the spirits. Adana's lips curved into a faint smile. "And how so?" "Because," Cheeky said, his tone growing serious, "I have seen beauty before, but none like yours. You have captured my heart in a single glance, Adana." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. The villagers, who had been eavesdropping unabashedly, exchanged wide-eyed glances. Had Cheeky truly spoken such words to this newcomer? Amara, who had been walking toward the well with her calabash, stopped in her tracks. Her heart clenched painfully as she heard Cheek's voice. He had once spoken such sweet words to her, promising a life together built on love and trust. And now, here he was, professing his admiration for another woman. Adana placed her water pot on the ground and tilted her head, studying Chika. "Your words are kind, Chike, but I am just a simple woman trying to make a life here. What could I offer someone like you?" Chike stepped closer, his eyes alight with determination. "You underestimate yourself, Adana. There is something about you, something I cannot explain but must follow." The villagers began to murmur among themselves. "This is madness," whispered Neka, the market vendor. "Chike is supposed to marry Amara. How can he forget her so quickly?" "Perhaps he has fallen under a spell," another woman suggested, her voice low and cautious. "Adana's beauty is not natural. Did you see the way she looked at him? It is as though she has bewitched him." Meanwhile, Amara stood frozen, her calabash slipping from her fingers and shattering on the ground. The sound drew Cheek's attention, but he only glanced briefly in her direction before turning back to Adana. Amara's heart broke in that moment. The man she had loved, the man she had trusted, had abandoned her without so much as a word of explanation. Chike extended his hand toward Adana. "Walk with me," he said, his voice soft but commanding. Adana hesitated, then placed her hand in his. Together they walked away from the well, leaving the villagers to their whispers and speculations. As they disappeared down the path, Amara wiped her tears and turned to face the gathering crowd. "This is not right," she said, her voice trembling with anger. "Something is wrong here, and I will not stand by while our village is plunged into chaos." Her words carried weight, and though many nodded in agreement, others remained silent, unsure of what to believe. The elders, who had been watching from a distance, exchanged knowing glances. "This is no ordinary matter," said Obiajulu, the eldest among them. "We must watch carefully, for the balance of our village is at stake." As the sun set, casting long shadows across the village, the whispers continued. Some spoke of Adana's beauty and charm, while others warned of dark forces at play. But one thing was certain. The arrival of this mysterious suitor had set events into motion that would change the village forever. He full moon hung high above the village, casting an eerie glow over the earth. Its light seemed unnatural, almost as if it had been summoned by unseen forces. The air was still. Not a single breeze stirred the leaves of the ancient trees, and the sounds of the night creatures were absent, as if they too were holding their breath. In the distance, the faint echo of a drumbeat could be heard, an offering to the spirits as the villagers celebrated the union of Chike and Adana. But within their marital hut, all was quiet, save for the soft rustling of Adana's clothing as she moved. Her eyes shone with a strange light, and the amulet she wore around her neck seemed to pulse with an energy that Chike could not understand. Chike, standing in the doorway, watched her with fascination. "Tonight, Adana, you are more beautiful than ever," he whispered, stepping closer. She turned to face him, a mysterious smile curling at the corners of her lips. "I have always been beautiful, Chike, but tonight..." Her voice trailed off as she reached for the amulet, fingers brushing the cold, smooth surface. As her hand made contact, a sharp crack echoed through the hut, like the sound of thunder on a quiet evening. The amulet, once whole and shining, splintered into jagged pieces that fell to the ground. Chike froze, his heart pounding in his chest. The room seemed to darken, the moonlight outside swallowed by a heavy cloud. And then there was a sound, a deep, guttural voice, ancient, powerful, and terrifying, spoke from nowhere. Its words were incomprehensible, but they carried a weight that shook the very air around them. Chike felt his knees weaken as the voice echoed in his bones. "Who dares to awaken me?" The voice was not just a sound, it was a presence, filling the room, suffocating him. Adana's body trembled, and her eyes, once dark and inviting, flared with an unnatural. For what seemed like an eternity, no answer came. The air grew thick with tension, and the village held its breath. Then, as if the spirits themselves had stirred, a gust of wind swept through the gathering, and the elder lowered his staff, his face grave. "The spirits have spoken," he said, his voice now quiet but resolute. "Adana's bloodline is cursed, and only one path can end it." The villagers leaned in, fear and hope mingling in their eyes. She must either remain a demon living in exile for the rest of her days, or she must offer her life as a sacrifice to cleanse her bloodline and free future generations. Adana, her monstrous form still trembling, glanced around at the villagers. Their faces were a mixture of fear, pity, and hope. She saw her own reflection in a nearby pool of water, a creature so twisted that even she could barely recognize herself. The glow of her red eyes flickered in the water, a stark reminder of what she had become. Her heart ached as guilt consumed her. She had once dreamed of being loved, accepted, but now all she saw was destruction. Her mother's warnings echoed in her mind, the ancient words of caution she had ignored in her search for power. She had awakened something that could never be undone. "Forgive me," she whispered under her breath, barely audible. The villagers waited in silence, watching her every move. The weight of her choices bore down on her, suffocating her. She could feel the ancient spirits whispering, urging her to make a decision, to choose the only way to end the curse. "Adana," the elder called softly, "the time has come. What will you choose?" With trembling hands, Adana rose from her kneeling position, her voice quivering with the weight of the decision she had made. "I will offer my life," she said, her words breaking through the tension like a crack of thunder. "I will give my life to cleanse my bloodline. May the ancestors remember me not as a monster, but as someone who sought to right her wrongs." Her voice was filled with sorrow, but also with a quiet resolve. "Please, let my sacrifice be enough to free my people from the curse." A heavy silence fell over the village. The villagers could hardly breathe, torn between the love they had once known in Adana and the fear they felt now. But none could deny the sincerity in her words. Beneath the ancient baobab tree, the elder began the sacred ritual. The tree, revered as the keeper of wisdom and ancestral ties, stood tall, its gnarled branches stretching toward the sky. The elder's voice rose in chants, invoking the spirits of the earth and sky, asking them to witness and accept Adana's sacrifice. Adana knelt beneath the baobab, her monstrous form casting long shadows on the ground. The villagers gathered in a circle, their faces somber as they watched her final moments unfold. The sky above seemed to darken, as if the heavens themselves were preparing to receive her. With each prayer the elder spoke. The air thickened with power, and Adana's body began to tremble. Her claws dug into the earth as her body began to dissolve into the dust, piece by piece. "I am sorry," Adana whispered, her voice now a fading echo. "May my soul find peace." And then, as the final words of the elder's prayer were spoken, a brilliant light erupted from the baobab tree, illuminating the entire village. The villagers gasped as the light filled the sky, signaling that the spirits had accepted her sacrifice, that the curse had been lifted. Cheek, standing at the edge of the crowd, fell to his knees, his heart heavy with guilt. He had been blind, driven by the illusion of love, never understanding the weight of Adana's past. Now, as he watched her fade into the light, he could feel her loss deep in his soul. "I should have known," he whispered, his voice thick with remorse. "I should have listened to the warnings. I should have seen the truth." As the light faded, and so the village was renewed, its people stronger, wiser, and bound together by the spirit of the ancestors. They knew that true love, true acceptance, began not in the desire for power or possession, but in the humility to recognize one's place in the world, and the willingness to make sacrifices for the greater good. As the narrator's voice echoed in the distance, the villagers knew that their story would live on for generations to come. "The heart's desires are not evil," the narrator said, But when pursued without regard for others or the wisdom of the ancestors, they can lead to ruin. True love and acceptance begin within. And so, the tale of Adana became a warning, passed down through the ages, reminder of the balance between personal ambition and the well-being of all.